This is Gems with Shom, the deepest conversations in beat digging, music production, and records. If you're new here, welcome. Follow the show and you'll get the stories, techniques, and knowledge that takes years of research to find out on your own. We come correct every week with that raw uncut. For those that know. Welcome to Gems with Shom, a show about beat digging, records, production, and other things. On today's show, we have Dante Ross. Welcome to the show, my friend.
What's up, man? How are you?
Appreciate your time, brother.
All good, man.
The majority of the people who check out the show would know who Dante Ross is, but you never know who's listening.
You never know.
You never know. Dante Ross is an A&R person, one of the architects of the golden era, starting the late 80s, 90s, and continuing on till today. From a management and creative standpoint, Dante has been behind some of the biggest records that come up on the show all the time. In addition, Dante is a Grammy award-winning producer, an incredible storyteller with his excellent biography, Son of the City.
Thank you.
It's a very well-written book. I'd recommend it to anyone. And he's been instrumental to the careers of many, many great artists. De La Soul, Queen Latifah, Old Dirty Bastard, MF Doom, Everlast, Busta Rhymes, and many, many others. And I'd also add, Dante is a noted beat digger.
I am. I love shopping for records. Everywhere I go, I do it.
Good. I have a feeling I might learn a thing or two from you today. One thing I should also add, related to beat digging, Dante was a part of production crew, Simulated Dummies, did tons of work with all those artists as we mentioned, Brand Nubian, Grand Poobah, LONS, Third Base, Dell, who I look forward to talking to you about.
I love
Produced
Dell.
across genres. I mean, rock, all kinds of work over the years. So it's pretty impressive. Yeah. All right, Dante, we always start from the beginning. You were born in San Francisco. You grew up in the Lower East Side of New York.
Yeah, I don't really remember living in San Francisco much as a kid. I was pretty young when I moved. I think I was about 3 years old when I moved.
Okay. When you grew up in the Lower East Side, I would imagine it's a very different time than it is now.
It's completely different. Like, it was definitely a whole different thing. You know.
Describe the atmosphere from a music standpoint.
Well, I mean, it was ungentrified at the time, and it was a largely Hispanic neighborhood. So there was a lot of like Latin music, like salsa, and it was when I moved there, it was the late 60s and early 70s when I became cognizant of music a bit more. And, like Fania was in full swing. So I grew up hearing, Willie Colon and Hector Lavoe and all of those great records, as well as, the funk pre-disco records. James Brown obviously was ubiquitous, and, all the records that were just going on, 70s funk stuff, P-Funk on down, Sly and the Family Stone. And then the stuff my parents listened to, Marvin Gaye was popular, and certainly Bill Withers, and, also singer-songwriter stuff like Van Morrison and Joni Mitchell and the Beatles. But yeah, like the sounds of the street were black and Hispanic music, largely not necessarily white music, so much. But we had a radio station called WABC, which was what we refer to as open format now is Top 40. And they played everything from Casey and the Sunshine Band to Stevie Wonder to, Thin Lizzy and Steve Miller, whatever was popular. So I grew up, kind of having a pretty open and eclectic palette of music to listen to.
Sounds like a good backdrop to learn about a wide variety of music.
Yeah.
Tell us about when Rapper's Delight came out.
Yeah, that was like 1979. I was 13, I think. 13, 14. And it was everywhere. It was a hit record. It was the first rap record most of us ever heard in the whole world, for that matter, outside of King Tim III, which I heard after the fact. The Fatback record, I heard that way after. And it was a hit record. It was like a novelty record, but I really liked it. And, from there I got introduced to rap music from a friend of mine named Jackie Van Horn. I have no idea where he is these days, but he was a fan of rap, and he had tapes of people rapping before records came out. And shortly after Rapper's Delight, we heard Super Rhymes by Jimmy Spicer and other records, of that sort. And like, yeah, rap music was cool. It was like kind of a novelty, but it was kind of cool. I mean, it was totally cool. And we played it at parties. It was like party music, and it sat side by side with like the end of the disco era and funk stuff and just what was happening with black music. And, you know, every kid my age in New York City knew Rapper's Delight. We knew the raps and we all loved it. It was like, here, I had the 45 of it. It was a hit record.
Dope, dope. So you're growing up in, let's say, the beginnings of rap
Yeah.
and as well before, right? So you had a kind of a wide musical palette at that point.
Well, I mean, the context in which I discovered Rapper's Delight was kind of pop music, if that makes sense. I always had an affinity for black music. I loved Stevie Wonder as a kid and Parliament Funkadelic, who my sister took me to see when I was in like seventh or eighth grade.
Wow.
I saw Earth, Wind and Fire when I was a kid. I saw the first show I ever went to was Ohio Players in the Jackson 5 in Madison Square Garden. I always
Incredible.
liked black music because you know, my neighborhood, that's what we listened to. I didn't really know a whole lot about rock music until maybe junior high school. Um, and, you know, like I thought Led Zeppelin was one person. I was like that guy, Led Zeppelin. You know, I had no concept of a lot of it outside of the Beatles, maybe, and a few other things that I liked. You know, so I was pretty drawn to black music pretty early on, and Rapper's Delight fit into that equation. And as we got a little older, I was into skateboarding and new wave and then punk rock. I was really into ska in the early 80s, like maybe 80, 81. I liked the Specials. I liked Devo. I liked bands like that. And then I got more kind of entrenched in punk rock. And I liked a lot of punk rock and punk rock in the early 80s in New York. And hip hop kind of lived in parallel universes, if that makes any sense. So pretty early on, we started to go to the Roxy and places like that, because we liked records like Rapper's Delight, and we liked early rap music. We liked Soul Sonic Force and Grandmaster Flash and all of these records. So we were entrenched in that kind of music. It was like the brother sister music of punk rock. We were really into the Bad Brains and a bunch of other bands. Black Flag and kind of hardcore punk rock, and that kind of ran its course pretty quick. There's only really a handful of those bands that kind of continued to be any interest to us or created timeless music. And we tuned into rap music and black music. We liked Rick James and shit like that. We were into like all of that kind of music as well. And that was kind of half the soundtrack of what we listened to. We listened to like Rick James and The Cure, like if that makes any sense. We were into all this other stuff. And rap music started kind of becoming cooler and cooler. It sat side by side with the emerging graffiti movement, graffiti entering fine art galleries, and rap music made the transition from being something that existed uptown or in Brooklyn or in Harlem to being at the epicenter of downtown coolness. And so it became an important part of the soundtrack of our lives. And me and my friends, like the women in Luscious Jackson or the Beastie Boys or friends of mine like that, people like Eric Hayes, et cetera, Futura 2000, we keyed into rap music, and it kind of remained a component in our lives to this day.
I think some of our audience might learn a lot from what you just said. I want to touch on a few things. So your interest, and use the term we, as in you went to all kinds of shows, punk rock,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
Hip hop. But was that
yep.
common, or was it just you because you were like that?
I mean, it was common amongst me and my friends. Were we aberrations? I'd like to think less so than the actuality of, but I do think that hip hop, in the early 80s in New York City, I can't speak for the rest of the country as much, had become a component of adolescent white kids. We dug it. New York's a very, eclectic city racially, culturally, and we all had friends of all colors and genders who listened to all genres of music. So for us, I don't think it was so uncommon. And the kids around my age who were cool, progressive kids who were open-minded, often the children of pretty hip parents, people who had artistic sensibilities. So we were open-minded, and it wasn't an aberration, but it was definitely kind of a downtown thing. So I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
It does answer the question. Some of the shows that you mentioned, like I said, a wide variety of music. You're going to a ton of shows. I mean, even if we're talking being a kid to your teenage years, you've seen a ton of amazing music, great artists, all-time great artists.
Yeah.
Take us into your mind as a young person going to these great shows. Like, what is the atmosphere like?
I mean, it depends what it is. Like going to see P-Funk, like I remember smelling PCP for the first time and asking what that was. I smelled, pop before, but I was like, what's that? And my sister was like, some shit you better never try. And it was angel dust, right? So I was like, okay. So the atmosphere, like going to see P-Funk was like the freakiest black people in New York City, right? It was like freaky, and freaky white people was freaky. It's just a freaky vibe. It was cool. Going to see the Bad Brains was like a totally different thing, but more racially balanced than you would imagine. The Bad Brains were black. New York hardcore always had a strong component of Latino people into it. I don't know why, and black people for that matter. So it was more racially mixed than you'd expect. That was one element of it, and that was like, like fucking, I don't want to say violent, but hyper physical and cathartic, a lot of hyper masculine energy. So that's one aspect. And going to see Run DMC was equally hyper masculine, but in a different way. Definitely aggressive, but more black than white in 1983. And going to see things like Jimmy Spicer or DST and the Infinity Rappers or Soul Sonic Force. Depending what venue you went to. You went to see it at Roxy. It was mixed crowd for sure, but more black and Latino than white. Danceteria would be the other way around, but pretty mixed. I never saw those groups in the outer boroughs, so I can't tell you what it's like to see Soul Sonic Force in the Bronx or Run DMC at the Fever. I didn't see that, but I did go to the Fever once as a kid, and the Fever was definitely not necessarily a mixed crowd, and it felt pretty dangerous, and I like that. So I liked kind of danger. I'm a thrill seeker, adrenaline junkie. So, each environment was a little different. Depends on context in which you saw these bands. So I don't know if, everything was different. Seeing the specials was amazing. They had a thing the Bad Brains had and Run DMC had. It was like a cathartic release of energy. Right. And there's a similarity in all of these things being that they were all honest. So being musically honest, very important to me as a kid. I don't know if I was able to articulate that, but because I grew up going to see the Bad Brains and Run DMC, and the Talking Heads and bands like that were phenomenal live bands, my bar for a live show was always very high. I saw P-Funk in 1978. I saw Earth, Wind and Fire with the upside down drum kit in the late 70s. I saw Kiss in like 1978. So, and they were like a spectacle. So I always had kind of a high bar for what I thought was good live.
Thanks for giving us a peek into that feeling. That's what I was trying to get at, because it's very hard to duplicate. And if you weren't there, I mean, it's just hard to know about.
I mean, I saw Rick James in 1981 at Madison Square Garden. That was fucking incredible.
Must have been crazy.
It was incredible.
Yeah. All right. You're growing up at the center point of culture, right? Across genres. Yeah. New York City. I mean, the home of it all.
And you got to remember that New York City was on the hind legs. New York was beat up from the feet up. It was fucked up. It was not a good time for New York City, financially or social services wise. The city was falling apart, but it was a fantastic time for art in New York City because art is always a reaction to dysfunction, and the dysfunction was at a high level. So was the art.
That's interesting you say that. Whenever I speak to a producer from that era, they often talk about their childhood, and many of them bring up the crack era.
That was later, though. That's 5 years later. That's post high school. So crack is 1985, 86, 87. And that's a different era. That's a little later. And, yeah, it was, look, I grew up in New York City in the early 70s. And there's a heroin epidemic when I was a child. And that was nuts. You'd see people nodding out. Like, it was wild. So the crack epidemic was pretty fucked up, but I did live in Manhattan then. So it wasn't as pronounced where I lived as it was in other sections of the city, but it was pretty crazy. The crack epidemic was hyper violent. And treacherous. It was a treacherous time in New York City. And once again, New York was still on its hind legs, but New York was worse in the early 80s, I believe, financially. So it was pretty dysfunctional. Everything was falling apart. 86 was like maybe the peak of the dysfunction. And then by the mid 90s, New York started to repair itself.
It's so
But
interesting.
86 is a great time for music. 86 is when rap music took over New York City.
All right. Then let's take it forward. So you're exposed to all of this. You're around the culture, seeing these great shows. You have this kind of family influence around taking you to shows. You start to take it more seriously. When did you realize this is a career?
When I saw my friends, the Beastie Boys, were probably going to get famous. So that's like 85, like pre-Licensed to Ill. They played the Apollo Theater, and I was like, oh shit, these dudes are going to make it. Like, it's there. Because I'd seen them play for black audiences before, and it was like a mixed response. But when they played at the Apollo, because they'd done a little tour with Houdini and Run DMC, they had figured it out by then. So when they played the Apollo, they tore that motherfucker up. And I was like, these guys are going to be famous. And I had proximity to, I knew Run DMC a little bit. I met them, and I knew Russell Simmons and Leor Cohen and the people around them. And I was like, this is a real thing. And I'd always kind of harbored an idea of somehow being in the music business. So when it was in front of me, I held on to their belt loops and I went for a ride. And they were gracious enough to let me hang on.
So I've heard about this legendary show at the Apollo that Beastie Boys did.
It's incredible.
You were there, right?
Yeah.
What was it like seeing them in front of a known tough audience, the toughest audience?
Made the toughest in the world, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
take us in there a little bit more.
I mean, the Apollo had the Sandman, right? They pull you off the fucking stage if you suck. So it wasn't an amateur night. They were playing with Run DMC and I think Houdini, but I could be wrong. And it was certainly Houdini. Maybe Run DMC wasn't on the bill, but I think they were. And I have it in my book. I'm right in my book because I checked the facts. So we all got drunk as a skunk. I went to buy a case of beer, Heineken's, and pick up Blimpie sandwiches with Jam Master Jay. It was maybe the first time I ever hung out with Jay, and Ronnie Ray, I think, was with us, and maybe his man Smitty or Marvin, one of them. And we went to Blimpie's, and someone thought I was into Beastie Boys, and we got the beers, and I think bought another case of beer after that. So we were pissy drunk. And the Beastie Boys were full of bravado, and they absolutely rocked the fucking Apollo. So at first, the audience was a little dismayed. Like, who are these fucking white boys? But by the time they did Hold It Now, Hit It, when they did Slow and Low first, and the 808 is so loud in that song, it definitely woke the Apollo up, and the Apollo started grooving with them. And when they did Hold It Now, Hit It, I want to say a large segment of the Apollo knew that record and didn't know that the Beastie Boys were white. And when they did that record, motherfuckers got up out of their seats and started chanting "Go White Boy" and dancing in their seats. And it was, in unison chanting "Go White Boy," and they just destroyed it. And I'd never seen the Beastie Boys get that reaction from a black crowd before. In fact, I'd seen them get stuff thrown at them. So to see that transformation and how confident they were. And when Mike D did the Jerry Lewis, the whole audience did the Jerry Lewis, the dance, and people were losing their fucking minds. It was like, it was a 4-star home run, complete fucking win. And I was like, my friends are going to get famous. And I think the wheels started turning like, let me fucking come along for the ride. And like I say, they were gracious enough to let me do it.
That story is incredible. I mean, just take us into that moment. It's so amazing. It's so legendary. I'm glad to hear it from you. Now, you see the opportunity. You see your friends getting popular. Also, all those legends you mentioned, they're a key part of this movement. Take us to your first opportunity as an A&R.
So that's considerably later. So if I got my foot in the door by 87 or 86 and a half, 87, I don't have a real A&R job for another year. So I get hip to I'm working for Cara Lewis at Norby, Walter's agent, and I'm functioning as a high level spy for Leor Cohen. This is kind of my job. It's a fucked up job. I hate working for Cara. Legend, and I respect Cara to death, but me and her, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be an agent. I didn't want to work for Cara Lewis. So Daddy O, they tried to hire him, I believe, at Tommy Boy, and he suggested they interview me for the job. I ran into Monica Lynch somewhere at a club downtown. She was like, "Hey, Daddy O, threw your name in the ring. Would you like to interview for a job?" So I did, and I interviewed the job, and I got the job. And she threw De La Soul in my lap. She had played me them when I interviewed for the job, and that was my first assignment. So I started someone says, from the bottom to the top very fast. All of a sudden I'm working with De La Soul. I have the pleasure of sending that record to my dear friend, Red Alert, who played it right away, and it becomes underground hit in New York City. So I am already off I'm on the ground and running. Back then, the circle of, I don't want to say power, but the community of hip hop was very small and accessible. And I end up, because of my time at Rush, in the center of it. So I have access to the most important man in hip hop, Red Alert, like direct access. And, man, I'm like in the middle of this thing. I have direct access to Russell Simmons and the Beastie Boys and Jam Master Jay, and I know LL Cool J and Rick Rubin and all these people. So I had a wide network of people in my corner already. 45 King dropped Latifah in my lap, him and Fab Five Freddy. I signed Latifah. Though Freddie has tried to rewrite history a little bit of late, he did not have anything. He did not work at the label. He did not sign her. He was not at the meeting that determined that I signed her for reasons unknown. 45 King did not come with Freddie to the meeting. Freddie did do the videos for them, and he was part of the connect, but I met 45 King at Latin Quarters, where Fat Five Freddy was never seen. I never saw him at the Latin Quarters, though he may have been there, but he was not part of my experience there. Latin Quarters was super gnarly, by the way, and it was like gladiator school on some levels. Fortunately for me, all I had was a bootleg Fila bucket hat and a swatch, so you couldn't take anything from me because I had nothing to take. And I hung out in the DJ booth a lot, and I was not in the center of the storm, thank God, which erupted many times. But I got handed Latifah while De La Soul was in full swing, and Latifah's first record, Wrath of My Madness, and Princess of the Posse. I do the handoff to Red Alert again, and it becomes a hit, like another underground hit. So the perception is I'm 2 for 2. And then Third Base starts kind of bubbling as well. It's a little later, but I get tapped on the shoulder to be interviewed for a job at Elektra Records after Tom Silverman declines to give me a real payday. So I was still slinging weed out of the office, and I had $36 to my name or something, and I had a lot of juice, but not a lot of bread. A lot of juice and a lot of girlfriends. I was a super hoe, and I lived in a railroad apartment, and I got a job working at Elektra Records, and shortly there, I lived on 100th Street with a roommate, 108th Street, and I moved downtown. Like the Jefferson said, I was moving on up, and I got my job at Elektra Records. and I guess the rest is history. You know, I got hired by Max Roach, the drummer's son. His son, Raul Roach, hired me. So I was hired by one of my dad's idols and someone whose music I would come to completely love later in life when I was old enough to understand it. And Raul was a gracious, and wonderful boss who totally trusted me. He, like all good bosses, he saw that I knew something he didn't know, and he trusted me to do my thing. He gave me enough rope to hang myself. His boss was a man named Bob Krasnow, became my boss. Raul recently told me that he was there for the first meeting. The second meeting, he stayed for about 2 minutes and left because he was like, I'm going to let my man sink or swim, like let him and Bob figure it out. And I guess I swam. Bob offered me a gig. And in that second meeting, he also gave me Tracy Chapman's Advance tape, cassette. I believe it was a cassette. And I went home and listened to it. And he played me Fast Cars in that meeting. And it blew my mind. It was like, I was like, because, you know, I always had a pretty eclectic understanding of different genres of music, from singer-songwriter to Beatlesque pop to rock music like Thin Lizzy, who I loved as a kid, and ZZ Top, The Who, bands I loved when I was like 11, 12 years old. So when he played, you know, and I grew up with like Neil Young, who I liked, and things like that. Not Joni Mitchell or Bob Dylan so much, but other singer-songwriter stuff like Van Morrison that I did like, because to me it's always about the voice, the vocals, which doesn't explain why I like Neil Young, because he's a terrible singer in a lot of ways. But Crosby, Stills and Nash, whatever, I love them because they could really sing, and Beatles could really sing. So I loved the Tracy Chapman record, and this guy had signed Parliament Funkadelic. Keith Sweat was on the label, Anita Baker, and now Tracy Chapman and the Pixies, who he had just signed, who were probably the best alternative band in the world at that point, at least American alternative band. And I was like, I want to work for this guy. He's fucking cool. He was a cool cat and super eclectic and smart. And I kind of could smell that he was like he was like a street guy. He wasn't some guy who lived in an ivory tower. And he had told me, he said, kid, the answers aren't in the building. They're outside of here in the street. And he was right. So he hired me, and my first record was a flop, but he hung in there with me. It was this girl Shazzy. It didn't really happen, but it had great critical response. God knows why. I thought the record was meh. In retrospect, I still think it's meh. But critics loved it. Robert Christgau, the dean of critics, so they called him, the grand poobah of the Village Voice, bigged it up. It was on his year-end list, John Perellis. So I kept my job despite the controversy that appeared in Billboard magazine that Nelson George, my so-called dear friend, said Dante Ross is not responsible for signing De La Soul, blah, blah, blah. But my boss paid it no mind. And my next record was Brand Nubian. And, you know, from there I was off to the races. What people don't know is the first Brand Nubian record, Feels So Good, was a tanker. It flopped. In retrospect, good record. Red Alert played it, but it was not a smash. And, I don't know, they trusted me enough to keep it going. And I had a lot of hurdles. My first video was Wake Up, directed by Fab Five Freddy. That was banned from MTV, which was, irony I will never forget. But the record had great critical response, great, street response. It was a sleeper. It sold. And from there, you know, I got enough rope to do a bunch of other cool shit. And I did a bunch of other cool shit at Elektra Records. It's one of the high points of my career.
That's fantastic.
Oh, and when we talk about digging, so I'm going to
Go ahead.
talk about digging. So I met 45 King. That guy was a digger. And he gave me some records. He gave me The Mail Must Go Through by The Cult, which is now like a couple $100 on fucking Discogs, a rare record that he used for Lakim Shabazz. He used a sample on that. He hit me to a lot of breaks. I was already buying lots of records. I'd been collecting records my whole life. The first record I ever bought was ABC, the album by the Jackson 5, I think. No, the Christmas album, then ABC. I already had the 45, but the ABC album. I think the second record I bought was Black Caesar with my own money. So I was buying records very young. 45s, they were 75 cents. I bought every hit record from Muskrat Love to Flashlight and everything in between because I loved records. It was my favorite thing to do with $1. You know, I'd also get a quarter left over. I'd get a ice cream or something. It was like my thing. Bought my records at Bate on Delancey Street, Bates record store, which is there forever. I bought Cutouts. I bought Honey by the Ohio Players. I bought Love Roller Coaster. I loved the Ohio Players as a kid. They were fucking great to me. Every Friday in grade school, we'd bring in a 45. I brought in The Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy, and I was the coolest cat in school for a day. And, you know, I loved music, man. I was poor. My house was dysfunctional, to say the least. And, my escape was music and sports. So I loved to play basketball, baseball, stickball, football. I loved every sport. So it led me to skateboarding, and I love music. Those are the cheapest forms of escapism I could find, and I wanted to get out of my own existence. Like a lot of us. The other thing we did was made fun of each other. So I'm infamous for, you know, I got snaps for days, and I have a thick skin. So, you know, it's part of also how I grew up. And these things got me through childhood. And fast forward to, you know, I'm working at Tommy Boy. I was buying tons of records at Downstairs Records, at all the, you know, used record stores in New York. I bought records. I lent De La Soul, Baby Let Me Hold You by the Detroit Emeralds, which they used. I lent Pos, Get Out My Life Woman by Lee Dorsey, which was my dad's record that I borrowed from him for life. I was, you know, Pos hooked it up. I saw him hook it up. He threw on the, you know, the rest of the stuff, including the Otis Redding sample from Fafa's song. And that was that record. So I knew something, and I knew a lot of the records that they were sampling because I grew up outside, and those are records I grew up on, you know. Of course, I knew Peg by Steely Dan because that was a classic. And Hall & Oates, I can't go for that, but I knew the, you know, the funk records. I knew Rapper Dapper Snapper by Edwin Birdsong. I like roller skated to that record. I had the 45. So, you know, I was in tune with what they were sampling because I grew up going to block parties, and I grew up with my sister's records. She's 8 years older than me. And, you know, I knew the Funky Penguin by Rufus Thomas. I had the 45 as a kid, Kool and the Gang, Summer Madness. I knew these records. So I didn't have to go to school to study them. They were second nature because of how I grew up. And I was lucky enough when I met 45 King, he expanded my palette. He showed me, Easy Dancing, the bootleg, not the version by Alvin Cash that's readily available. I mean, it was Alvin Cash, but it's a different version. And man, I was off to the races. You know, I knew the records. That's Dance for Me by Latifah, for those who don't know. And man, I was just that, and that's the Alvin Cash version, not the Commodore's version, which is commonly called Hut or Easy Dancing. So, you know, I learned a lot from 45 King. I learned a lot from Paul. I learned a lot from the De La's. I learned a lot from cats who worked at Downstairs Records. I learned a lot from DJs and, you know, my man Willie Dynamite and Easy Mo B later, and, you know, Grand Poobah and everyone. And Grand Poobah taught me something very important about digging, was that there were R&B records that weren't quite that old that were equally important when we were making music, like Nobody Can Be You But You by Steve Arrington. So I knew the record, but I didn't know you could necessarily sample those records. It took my mind to a different place. De La too. You could sample a white like rock record or a yacht rock record like Say No Go or Peg. So my palette and the way I started thinking was greatly expanded by being around these people. So, you know, man, Paul C. hit me to records. He told me that every version of Get Out My Life Women probably had a break on it. So I bought every version I could, from the Mad Lads to Wilmer and the Dukes and everything in between, the Leaves and all the versions I could of that, you know. And my dad was a fan of the Meters and Lee Dorsey, so I rated his records, you know. And my sister liked Parliament and Kool and the Gang and James Brown, and Just Begun by Jimmy Castor. And so I rated her, I got her records, and on and on and on, man. I just kept going and looking for records. And as time moved on, I knew I got hip to the Super Disco Breaks by Sam Sever, my downstairs neighbor, while I worked at Rush Productions, and bought them all. So I was always looking for records. The Blackbirds, The Baby. I had that album, got it from my sister, Mysterious Vibes. So, man, I was always keyed into records, and the golden age of sampling were records I kind of grew up with, and all of us did. So I was in the same wheelhouse of thinking about records that my contemporaries and peers were. And I love records.
There's so many things that you said that are exciting the shit out of me. So I'm going to ask very specific questions.
Sure.
You worked extensively with Grand Puba and Brand Nubian.
Yep.
Grand Puba is a legendary MC, super
one of the
original.
best who ever rapped.
Right. One of my personal favorites.
Amazing.
He's maybe less known for his production skills. And
he's a great producer.
Tell us
more about that. He's taught me a lot about production. It's funny you say that. So he's the guy who told me less is more. So I was really into the Bomb Squad. I want to put a lot of things in everything. And he was like, nah, this is how you do it. And De La told me this. Mace hit me to this too. You're doing too much. So Pooh Bah was addition by subtraction. And he understood that. And that's like, to me, the way I was thinking was kind of rock and roll, like the Bomb Squad.
Yeah.
And he taught me to look differently, think differently, dig differently. So yeah, he was a huge influence, and he was like, ride that one loop. It doesn't need a change up. Like, it might not even need a kick and a snare. Like, just leave it as is, because the beauty was in the art of the emceeing on top of the very funky musical bed. The changes per se, the chord changes, came with the lyrics, with the rapping. So I didn't know that, and he taught me that. And that was a very important lesson to learn. I mean, Pooh Bah taught me as much as anyone about music, digging, and how to be funky. Less is more. And unfortunately, our relationship is a bit strained at times, because I think he wasn't appreciative of some of the things I said in the book about him. But I do love Grand Pooh Bah for all of our minutia, and he was a super important mentor, teacher in my life. So in many ways, and in good and bad.
Well, just thinking back to your book, you were quite positive. Maybe he was a rap star and you were an A&R. It's very hard to control a guy like that. So maybe that's it.
As you get older, you learn you can't control anyone. You can only control yourself. My divorce would attest to that. But yeah, I mean, Grand Pooh Bah, man, he's one of the baddest motherfuckers who ever did it. He's fantastic.
Yeah, that style. I mean, I consider him one of the most original, one of the best, and just a personal favorite. He's famous. Yeah, he's known. I just feel like it could be way more.
And part of that is, the way his career, whatever happened in it, like, we all know what happened. But yeah, he man, when it came to just, I have this theory that there's a lot of MCs who were the greatest MC for a year or two. For 1 year at least, maybe a little longer, Grand Pooh Bah was top dog.
Yeah.
Ice Cube was top dog for like 2 years, right? Like there's, dudes, Method Man was top dog for 6 months, maybe a year. The dude who's top dog for a minute, like Bong Bong Bong, right? And then there's the guys who are top dog, for long, Jay-Z, Nas, Biggie. Kane had like 2 years, right? Maybe longer. Rakim has forever, right? So dudes are top dog for a minute. Some dudes aren't. But just to even be top dog for a year or two, that's a huge accomplishment. And there's no doubt in my mind that he was top dog for a year or two, just like Tretch was top dog for a year or two.
Yeah. I think all the people you mentioned, not only were they successful and the top, they were all kind of originators in their own way. Like they were
because you couldn't bite back then, right? Because you had to be unique. Kool Moe Dee was, when he was Treacherous 3, he was unique. Run DMC were unique. LL was Run DMC 2.0, but he was unique, right? Rakim with the big words, Chuck D with the voice and the political messaging, right? Even you fast forward to hieroglyphics, no one rapped like that before them. Or Outkast, right? Andre 3000, Eminem. The great MCs are singular in the way they MC. Yes, they are influenced by others, but the greatest MCs, Kane or Kendrick, they are singular entities in the way that they rap. Be Real, the Beastie Boys, you know, whether you consider Be Real, the Beastie Boys, the greatest MCs, to me, they are in the pantheon of greatness. They are people that I consider great. And for periods of time, you know, Top Dog beat Cypress Hill with the top dogs in my book for a period of time. So, you know, that's how I look at it all, you know, like the art of MCing. As we got more and more MCs, it became harder to have a singular top dog MC. But all of the people I mentioned are people who contributed to the culture and the beauty, the art, the craft of MCing. And don't get it fucked up. At the end of the day, the MC is the most important part of rap music.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. One part we spoke less about so far in this discussion is your role as a producer. Tell us about your early days. You're obviously knowledgeable about break beats. You had it all around you. You had your ear cultivated by your life in New York City.
Yeah.
Maybe your relationship with Red Alert and kind of seeing what goes off. Was that a conscious step? Like, hey, I'm an A&R. Now I'm going to make beats. How did it work for you?
So I saw Prince Paul and De La making 3 Feet High and Rising, and a couple of my records made it onto the record. And I was like, maybe I could do that. And Sam Sever was my downstairs neighbor, and he borrowed a couple of records as well when he was doing third bass. And I was like, maybe I could do this. So Sam was very technical. I never mastered the 808 or 909 drum machine like Sam did. Prince Paul was another version of technical. S900, 1200. Paul was very, I first guy I ever saw Time Stretch a sample. So I was taking notes, and I had these two friends I grew up with. We were all into punk rock. John Gamble and Gibi Dejani, rest in peace. Gibi was my best friend. He was a funky cat. He grew up in Harlem, then moved downtown. And Gibi knew all the funk records. He was a huge mentor to me in terms of what to buy to dig off the breakbeat map. Right.
Sorry about your friend Gibi.
Thank you. He was awesome. He was hilarious. And he made Step to the Rear more than he made it. I had the little change up, the piano change up from a record I won't name, but you know, and he had the loop that is the basis of the record. So I learned a lot from those guys. And I saw John one day in Central Park. He's like, oh, I got a studio. We got a sampler. I know you're doing this and that. And he, not Gibi, which is ironic, invited me to the studio. And I also had an SL 1200 turntable. They didn't. Okay. So I had the Techniques turntable. They had some bullshit turntable didn't have a pitch wheel, I don't think. Didn't have a slider. So I brought my turntable down with the slider and I left it there, and I bought a mixer because I could write it off. So I had an expense account. So I had a lot of records, and Gibi had a lot of records, and we just started mixing and matching records. And we get drunk every night. We get a 6-pack or two of Rolling Rock. We drink and smoke, and we had no end game. Huge influence on us were the Beasties, who are younger than those guys my age, but we saw them do it. And particularly the records that really influenced us were Takes a Nation of Millions, 3 Feet High and Rising, and Paul's Boutique. Paul's Boutique, because they used a lot of crazy records that we knew, and they were our friends, and we knew there were two white guys doing all this crazy shit, and we were like, kind of like, Gibi's Palestinian, but we were like, you know, we could do this too. I guess we felt inclusionary. It's like, look, Larry Bird I like Larry, the way he shot baskets. I want to shoot like Larry Bird, right? We all want to see a hero who looks like us. You know, it's just how it is. We're impressionable. So we also thought that, like, we could do this. Rick Rubin did it. We could be part of the culture too. And people were nice enough to me, kind enough to open the door and say, hey man, you could participate too. So don't get it fucked up. Hip hop is black art, you know, and we're lucky enough to be allowed to be in it. And with that comes a great responsibility, and one that I believe I've always upheld. I understand the responsibility. So, needless to say, that aside, we started just mixing and matching loops. We did some demos with Shazzy. I signed her. She liked the demos in a self-serving way. I was like, I'll do the whole album. We did the whole record, which is weird. Conflict of interest much. But I believe that our production on an album is what made people like that album. So this is, I firmly believe that. And why it ended up being a critical darling. So I figured we could do some things. But the next level of producing records was working with Grand Poobah. Well, and I did one record with CJ Moore, Uptown, Dope on Plastic. So I did that record. CJ did the technical part of it for the most part. Showed me how to work at SP1200 while we were making it. Was another mentor of mine, but I had all the records. Those are all my records. So, and most of them are Kool and the Gang's greatest hits, volume 1, with a couple other little things in there. Can You Dig It by Parliament Funkadelic, and, but nothing too off the map. And I had the sound, the horn sound is my Public Enemy homage, Kool and the Gang as well. And that record connected, man. People played that fucking record. So I was like, okay, maybe I know what I'm doing a little bit. So then working with Poobah, I figured out the next level of trying to do stuff. I just always had a beat tape, and here's my beat tape. Leaves of New School picked a couple of beats from me. I had more access than most with rappers because of my job. But I never, I charged almost nothing to make stuff with me. And, I was like not predatory in any way, shape or fashion. And if you didn't want to work with me, fine. If you did, great. So that was that. And I just kept moving. Third base, my friends who weren't signed by me picked a bunch of my beats for the second record after we did, was Three Strikes to 5,000, which I listened to recently, and I was like, oh, the drums sound pretty good on it. And that was another pretty rare 45. The drums is Super Fine From Behind Woman by the Cleveland Wrecking Crew, which is a pretty rare 45. It goes for a pretty penny now. I kind of knew what I was doing, I guess, and I used Wild Magnolia's record on it, Hand to Wanda, I think. And I don't know, man, it just kind of went off, and I was lucky.
Was the first record that you produced that you heard on the radio, was that Shazzy or CJ Moore?
It was Shazzy, but mostly the instrumental of a song called Heartbreaker. But yeah, that's the first. And then the first was Dope on Plastic, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Dope on Plastic. Marley Mark killed that record. He played it to death. And hearing him, he would cut up, hey, yo, Dante, oh, yo, Dante. I was like, oh my God, I'm famous.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask about. You've been around music your whole life, and now you hear yourself on the radio. How did it feel?
I also had a promo on Red Alert, and that was like, I was brand name. Look, I Red Alert had a promo. Chuck Chill Out ran a promo. I was literally driving around downtown with Jam Master Jay, rest in peace, my big homie, in his Suburban, driving down 8th Street. And motherfuckers are like, yo, Dante's hanging out with this dude and that dude. I became kind of like in my circle of friends. I was like famous. I was becoming like I was like noteworthy cat.
Yeah, you're famous. Yeah, you're famous.
I was in the Stussy. I was in the Stussy ads. I was a pretty good skateboarder, good athlete. Was outside, like the kids say nowadays. Was a wild kid, and man, I was kind of like brand name. I could get in any club for free, and whatever. I was like, I was the coolest kid on the block, and yeah, man, it felt great to hear my name on the record, on the radio. Was like, I made it. I was like, I made it. I was like, I felt like I've made it. I'm this guy, it felt fucking great. And I was, a pretty arrogant kid. I had a lot of ego and a lot of, machismo, but man, it felt great. And I had this good job, and this brand Nubian always bigged me up in the records, and
Yeah.
I was very close to them, SD, are you with me? Poobah threw us a shout, and, DR, are you with me? And DR, he threw my name in there a lot. Poobah, we were tight. And, man, I had notoriety, and it felt good, man, making records. And I love making records. I recently, not that recently, but I had Stretch during the pandemic. I sent him bags of cassettes because he had nothing to do, and he literally digitized all my beat tapes. So
Crazy.
I have hundreds of beats, most which never came out, digitized, and I have them sitting on a drive, which is crazy. And songs that never came out, like records with lots of people that never saw the light of day that are sitting on my drive. So yeah, man, making records and making beats, and I had two jobs. I used to think maybe I had like five jobs, but I was an A&R guy, and then I was a beat maker, and I did one during the day and one at night. And somewhere in the middle of that, I managed to fit going out to clubs all the time too. So
Yeah. I mean, if I were to just reflect, hearing your name on records, I was maybe less than 10. And you were, to me, the definition of a star A&R. And now,
let me ask
talking
you
to
something.
you,
Did you
yeah,
think I was white or black? Did you know?
I thought you were white, but I don't know why. And maybe I saw you in a video. Maybe that's why, but I cannot recall.
People would always say, yo, I thought you were black because my
It does
name's
sound,
Dante.
yeah,
And a
it
lot
could
of black
sound
people are
funny.
named Dante. So
That's true. Well, another observation I'd say is maybe because, I mean, you're a successful A&R, maybe because you care a lot about creativity, the creative part of music, you genuinely know about it, you have an actual opinion that matters. And reading your book, listening to you now, it seems like it really sparks something in you when you talk about your creative involvement, your production, because you didn't start making beats and then you got into it and you were
nope.
massively successful over time.
I mean, yeah, I mean, making beats is like, I felt like, like there's levels, right? And I was like, I'm on the next level now. I hit this level. I did this, but I did this too. So, I could do a lot of things. I was like a multitasker, like I always, like someone said I was like a Swiss Army knife, and I like that. I was like, yeah, I could do a lot of things, and I'm master of many, many arts. I was pretty good at graffiti. I was nice with the hands, when I was a kid. Good skateboarder, pretty good athlete. I mastered, I used to, I'll go out to a club and dance all night. Like, I always was very, I could do a lot of things. I was like, pretty good at most things I tried to do. And a lot of that came from my man Gibi. He was great at everything he did. So I always tried to be like him. And I guess I was, he was like my role model. And man, I just like was deeply involved in it, and I loved digging for records. And the thing that I guess sparked it all, or the thing I liked the most, is knowing what other people didn't know. That secret piece of information, that is always that knowledge, right? Because I'm a collector. I collected sneakers. I collected baseball cards as a kid. I collected 45s. I collected breaks. I collected records. I collected knowledge, information. And to collect knowledge and information was the most useful collecting of anything I ever did. I collect the oral history of this. I ask a lot of questions, and I was smart enough to shut up and listen when the people whose info I wanted were speaking, whether it was Prince Paul, whether it was Red Alert, whether it's my dad, whether it's Easy Mo B, whether it was my mother, whether it was Chuck D, whether it was Nelson George, whether it was Leor, whether it was blah, 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 blah. I learn a lot, and I learn a lot from people younger than me as well. So, like I learned stuff from people as, people like even Lord Sco teaches me shit. Like, you know what I mean? I learn things all the time, and I learn them from all kinds of people from all walks of life. So, for me, that's really cool. Like I learn a lot that way.
That is amazing. We're going to move to everyone's favorite segment of the show. You've been interviewed so many times in your life. I figure you've been in the public eye.
You know what's cool but annoying about that? I will walk down the street, not in LA because we don't walk anywhere, but in New York, I will walk down the street. I was just there for like almost 2 months. And every fucking 50 feet in the East Village or downtown, people were like, yo, Dante Ross. And I like when people are like, yo, Dante Ross, thank you. Or like, yo, what's up, Dante Ross? Or give me a pound. But when they want to talk to me about like KMD or some shit, I'm like, it's a little exhausting. But when I walk around Lord's Go, we can't go anywhere. Like we cannot get down the fucking block in New York. It's kind of annoying, but I guess it says you did something.
Oh, you
I
did
mean, it happened
something.
to me in London a bunch too, which was cool. And the English are, I liked their approach to it. You know, it was like, it was cool.
The reason why I brought that up is because I know you've been asked many questions over your many interviews, and you've also written a great book. So you shared your story. I figure in this segment, drop a gem on them. I'll bring up a topic, a song, a person. You give me your personal reaction. It can be a feeling, an anecdote, a story, anything, whatever comes to mind. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned going to London and you are a beat digger. Tell me about your experience digging in Europe and your interest in library records.
Okay. So library records are foundational. They're late 80s, early 90s, all the way to the forever. The KPM libraries obviously did the Wolf libraries. We all use those all. I had a complete set of I still do of the KPM. So I have the complete set before the reissues. I found them
You're killing me. That's
in
insane.
I found them. A friend of mine told me about them, and I literally went to Chicago record hunting and went to Joplin, Missouri, where they were sitting in a record store, and I copped them all. They didn't know what they were, and I bought them all. So I had them all. Um, and so those are invaluable records. I've used a lot of them. We all have, those are foundational records. We love those records. They're fucking funky as fuck, and everyone used them, and we all use them with good reason because they're great records. So those sound libraries are phenomenal. And then there's what was the other question? Oh, digging in Europe. Yeah, like every time I've gone, I went digging, and mostly London when I was younger because I didn't really go many other places, but I did go to Manchester and up north and did some digging. I would go to, but in London, I'd hit the Camden Lock, all the flea markets, and then Honest John's. And later, I became a big collector of reggae. I'd go to Dumb Vendor before it closed, and all the shops in Ladbroke Grove. And you could even I was just there recently, and I literally did some digging, and I went to just eat at where's it what's a place in New York State? I'm drawing a blank. Spitalfields Market, and they had people selling records out there, and I went and copped a couple of 45s. So I was like, anywhere I go, I'm going to buy a record. Now, I wasn't there on a digging mission, but I bought a bunch of records. I came back between London and New York, because I went to Human Head and A1 a couple of places. I came back with a stack. I had a stack of 45s. So that I'll show you, I'm never going to stop digging. I love digging for records. So, and digging in Europe, though, Amsterdam is cool, but overpriced. But Germany, that is a great place to dig because everything has a sleeve. They're all picture sleeves. So you get the sleeve for everything and the prices are cheaper. And
Are we talking Berlin? Where did you go? Hamburg?
Berlin and Dusseldorf were both really good. Berlin, I've spent more time, so more digging there. I've never really done a deep dive for digging in Paris, though I understand it's great, but I haven't. Every time I've been to Paris, I've been relatively busy or on vacation with like a woman. And women, if they know me, they don't let me go in a record store because it's going to waste 2 hours of their day. And if it's my girlfriend, they're like, we're not doing that this trip. So
I feel like I've heard that story before from people.
yeah, it's how it is, man. So yeah, I found gems all over Europe, all over London, all over. I mean, Manchester up north is phenomenal for digging, because less people are digging up there. So man, I found records everywhere and anywhere, and I always look for records. It's part of what I'm looking for. That's part of the experience. Being in a record store, and you always meet cool people in record stores. The guys who own record stores become friends of mine, and now I got someone to tap into when I go to that city.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I mean, Japan is like top of the food chain.
Well, tell me about digging in Japan. Tell us about the experience.
I mean, Japan, it's like, I've gone Manhattan, Cisco. I'm friends with Muro. I always go to I went digging with Coco last time I was there.
Does Muro speak English?
He doesn't.
I really want to interview him, but
he speaks
does not.
Little.
King of digging.
Like a little. Okay. Coco doesn't speak any English.
Legend.
But hanging out with Coco is amazing. And, the sushi speaks English. The sushi, and he translates, so it's always cool. And I did some digging with those cats. He put me up on he showed me a gem recently when we were in Tokyo. Osaka's decent for digging too. I went to Coco Isle last time I was there. I'm big on dancehall 45s, and I spent a day there, and I came back with a stack, like, you know, came back with a crate of records pretty much. And I'm gonna go in November again. I'll do it again. I love buying records. It's then Japan is like, an exchange rate was so good, and I bought lots of clothes and lots of records. So yeah, Japan is top of the food chain for digging in my book.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that you're so knowledgeable and so passionate about beat digging. But I mean, I didn't know you were so international about it. Great to hear. My man Cherry Stones used to work for Jazzman, which is a
Yeah,
record.
yeah. I buy a lot of stuff from Jazz, man.
Yeah,
I bought a
yeah,
lot of stuff from. He had a stall in Camden back in the
yes,
day. I knew Jazz, man. I mean, I talked to him like when my book came out. We exchanged emails, but I knew Jazzman, and Jazzman had a stall at Camden. I bought a lot of records from them over the years, and they do some of the best reissues. And they reissued a famous sample I used for Grand Poobah, the Birdie Green, Return of the Prodigal Son, and I got the 45 from Jazzman, and yeah, man, that's like one of the best sites there is. And man, I spent a lot of money and a lot of their reissues sound tremendous, beautiful. The represses are great. Unlike the Get On Down, the represses not so good. The represses from Jazzman are done with love and care. And he sent me a list of stuff they had coming out not that long ago. Yeah, that's a great site.
yeah. Great store. I remember I went to university there, and I was very poor, and I just used to like just look at the records at Jazzman and like,
Yeah, man, that guy had
eh,
everything, man. That guy
yeah,
bought, I bought a gang of shit from him. And like, the other thing about bead digging is it doesn't really matter like how rare it is or isn't. There's beauty in everything. Like, look, man, there's records I'll buy every time I see them. If I find a Ooh Child by the Five Stair Steps, I'm gonna buy it. And if
yeah,
I find a Rufus Thomas to Breakdown Part One or Two, I buy it. Just records that are pretty common, but like they're great records. And I think one of my lives of 45s is because in the last maybe 8 to 10 years working at a major label, I had to polish a lot of turds and I had to find a lot of things that I signed to keep a job. And I won't say they were turds, but they're not music that connects with my soul in the way that, like, say, Brand Nubian or P Rock and CL Smooth or, Doom did, or Dell, it doesn't have, or even making Everlast records. They didn't connect to me the same way as some of these other things. So buying my analog 45 rare record or dancehall record or boogie record really like connect me to the reasons I love music in a way that doing A&R might not have. Doing the A&R gig like paid my bills for sure. It's nice to have money, but it's also nice to remember the reason why you love music, the passion. And the passion of music comes from those records, not from working on, not gonna name artists, I don't want to disparage anyone, but working on things I worked at towards my last run as an A&R guy. It's not the same. It's not the same thing. So, playing 45s and doing my 45 parties at Stretch in New York and playing with the Mobile Mondays crew and M's and all the guys and becoming close with Breakbeat Lou and all of these wonderful people I've had the pleasure to DJ with, whether it's J Rock or Peanut Butter Wolf in LA or Just Blaze or Plattern or Benji B in London or whoever it is, wherever it is, man, that's what it's about to me. That's the real thing. And that's like the love of it, right? That's when I feel like I'm connected to the music and I'm really, that's the thing. So for me, it's important shit because you want to know and remember why you love records. And I think it takes me back to when I bought the 45 of ABC as a kid, or I went in a record store. I was like 9 or maybe 10 years old, and I was like, "Do you have this record by a group called Queen?" And they were like, "Queen." They were like, "What record?" And I didn't know the name of it. I was like, "Mamma Mia, Mamma Mia," and they were like, "That's not on 45." But there's an album, and I saved my money up to buy that record, Night at the Races, so I could have Bohemian Rhapsody, right? So that's like why I love music, man. Like to buy Ooh Child as a kid, right? That meant so much to me. Or In the Rain by Ann Peebles. Like I bought that 45, that was my shit. Do, 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 do. The intro was just such
yeah,
a cool record. Um,
sick.
so to buy those records, I guess playing 45s and digging, because I only dig for 45s now. I don't dig for albums because I have, 10,000 plus albums. and 12 inches. And I have more records than I can keep in one place. Um, that 7 inch, the digging for the sevens, keeps me connected to the thread of why I love music. It's like a direct conduit.
That passion, that authenticity is why people listen to you. I mean, and if you didn't have that, your taste wouldn't matter or wouldn't be as real and no one would listen. So that like real passion is what informs everything.
And I feel like that passion is exhibited in all the things I love. So, whether it's skateboarding or my knowledge of funk or soul or history, I'm a stickler for facts and the history of things. That love is inherent in all of that. And my utter appreciation, love for black music and culture. Because without it, my life is not informed and I am not the person I am.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about so many things. I have to talk about some of the maybe most well-known records that you have some association with. Pete Rock and CL, TORY.
Man, I mean, I didn't believe it was a single necessarily, though. I didn't make it an obstacle or anything of that sort. So I always believe in well, it's twofold. One, I'm not the best at picking singles. My favorite record's probably not your hit single. I'm esoteric. And, we had great success with the creators, so we were set up to win. And God bless Funkmaster Flex. He flipped it over. Go with the Flow as the A side. And he was like, I'm playing this. So we had one. We walked in with the hit record and, or the shot at a hit record at least. Foundation was set and those guys were insistent. That was the record. It was never an argument. I trusted their vision and it was a beautiful record and was my favorite record on the album. Though I thought Straighten Out might be a bigger hit song, I deferred to them and thank God I was wrong. And, it's a beautiful record. It's one of the records I made that still gets played in the club and it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful sounding record. Pete Rock is a genius. No one made anything that sounded like what he was doing before he did it. He's a paradigm shift. The way that, say, Timberland was later, the way that maybe James Brown was or Parliament Funkadelic, he is a paradigm shifter. He changed the way we all made records and the way records sounded for several years to the point where he got emulated so much it wasn't maybe as important as when we first heard it. But Pete Rock is a genius, and that's a beautiful, beautiful, soulful record.
Did you get connected with Pete Rock through Red Alert? How did you meet them?
No, no, no. Raul Roach was friends with Eddie F. He loved Heavy D and the boys, and he wanted to be in business with Eddie F. And he roped me into the Pete Rock and CL Smooth thing, and I thought it was great. He said, I'll sign this if you co-sign it. I co-signed it with him. He left his job, and they ended up in my lap. He never was there when the record came out, and they knew who I was. I knew who they were. It was, it was cool. We were cool in the gang from jump, and they were just Eddie F was my friend. Their manager was my friend. Tracy Waples, who went on to be a big A&R, was like the young Dunny running around, and she was awesome. We remained friends, and yeah, man, it was cool. It was easy. It was all easy, man. My preceding reputation helped. They saw what I was doing with Brand Nubian, and they liked me, and I liked them. We were cool. Me and Pete would talk about records. It was just always easy, man.
It's incredible. It's a timeless song, one of the greatest producers of all time.
Yeah, man.
MF Doom. What does that bring up for you?
Emotion.
Sorry, brother.
I talked to him about him a lot. I kind of told myself I was going to stop talking about him because it's been exhausted a lot. I'll make an exception here. He was great. He was hilarious. He went through a lot of bullshit in his life. He got handed a lot of garbage. And like the great blues singers, he took that and, he made lemonade out of lemons, man. And whether it was his brother dying, getting killed, or him getting fucked by the label and the Billboard reporters behind it, and getting deported, or not getting deported, not being allowed to come back to America, his health issues, all of these things. But man, through it all, his irreverence and idiosyncratic way of looking at the world, making records, his sense of playfulness and humor, his wordplay, the way he rapped was unparalleled, one of one. And I always say this, I worked with Zev Love X. I didn't work with MF Doom, but MF Doom was my dear friend, as was Zev Love X. So he was always Doom, always, but his art became MF Doom, and it's different art than Zev Love X. So Zev Love X is, say, high school. Doom is college or college grad school. His master's thesis was MF Doom. And he's one of the greatest who ever did it. Idiosyncratic. No one could do what he did, and no one will ever replicate what he did. There is no one else like him, and his rapping is the polar opposite of the complexity of, say, a Kendrick Lamar or Rakim. He is not basic. His rhyme patterns are completely unique and advanced. His wordplay is irreverent and ridiculous, and nobody ever did what he did before. Doesn't rhyme on purpose sometimes, and it's just his word choices. And who makes a song like Rap Snitch Knishes? Like, who does that? Like, I mean, come on. The guy's like, he's a genius, and he will be studied and studied and studied. And one thing I hate about that, I appreciate the fact that he studied, but the scholarly, overly intellectual, usually white scholar who dissects MF Doom is missing the point. They're missing the funk, right? And they probably never went to the club and danced all night, and probably never wore a gold chain in a place where it could get took off your neck. And they probably never experienced the things that made MF Doom, MF Doom. So to me, their understanding of it could be very studied and scholarly, but the innate understanding of that, they will never understand. So, and it doesn't have to do with color, because certainly Alchemist understands MF Doom, but that super intellectual, over analyzing guy who's probably going to teach a college course on it. Like, I love Dan Charnas, but I hope he doesn't write a book about MF Doom. Like, I'll just leave it at that, because that to me doesn't need to be done. Certainly not by him. Not by him. Like, maybe Prince Paul wants to write the book. I'll read it.
There's an MF Doom book. It's pretty good. It's written by.
I hated it.
Okay.
I hated it. He paraphrased my quotes and other people's quotes. So we didn't ever sit down and were never interviewed by him. And the family didn't ordain it. And I don't particularly like his writing. And I think I struggled to make it through that book. And I didn't feel the authenticity in it. But that's me. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Well, you were there, so your opinion matters. Right? You were there from his early days.
Not according to S.A. Fernando, it doesn't.
You were definitely involved, right? You were involved at an early stage, and at least from everything I've heard.
But also, I mean, beyond that, I remained friends with him forever.
Right. You were his true friend.
I spoke to him shortly before he passed. He was my guy. I had constant contact with him.
Yeah. That's why it's especially interesting to ask you, because I would refer to Doom as one of the greatest comeback stories you'll ever see.
He rose. Some would say he rose from the dead.
Yeah. Well, at a period of kind of lost years where he wasn't in the public eye.
Yeah.
Things might have been tough. Let's just say.
No, they were tough.
Yeah.
But you know what? You can't keep a great man down. And he turned around and look, to me, he single-handedly is the most important artist of the so-called backpack movement. He starts it. It starts with him and Kool Keith. To me, that's where it really comes from. Like, those guys were, I don't want to say backpack, but the underground thing, like they were guys who had been on major labels, and they were no longer on major labels, and now they were gonna do it their own way, unfiltered, uncensored. Not that they were very censored before. Imagine censoring Kool Keith, but these guys made idiosyncratic music that inspired many, 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 and it's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Fucking MF Doom, his name's gonna live forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you feel that way because I could imagine it's mixed. For all the reasons you said, he's more popular today than when he was alive.
Yes, he was, and that's beautiful.
Okay. I'm
Ultimately,
glad
it's
you feel that way
beautiful.
because it's kind of strange in a way, right?
It's ultimately beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I have little kids who are like my friends' children and shit who want to ask me about MF Doom. My friend Jordan's son, I sent him the MF Doom Super 7 figures, and I'm his favorite person, right? Because of this. Like, he's like, Dante, whenever he sees me. And, you know, all these kids, like my friend Paul's son, he just loves MF Doom. So, you know, man, I love that the young kids, the youth, have taken him as their own. I walked into, and then we'll move to the next thing, to this place I like to eat at, the sandwich spot over in Larchmont, and I had an MF Doom shirt on, and the kid behind the counter, you know, he's got the like that fucking disillusioned barrister face on, like, oh, you like MF Doom? And my friend Steve, who doesn't really know MF Doom's music, but knows of my allegiance and friendship with him, says he doesn't just know MF Doom, he helped discover him. The kid's like, huh? He's like, my friend's like, you ever hear of KMD? He's like, oh, that was his group before, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I kind of explained to him, and he's like, oh, that's cool, man. You know, and now that when I go in there, the kid's like, hey, what's up, Dante? You know, he like cool with me and knows who I am. But you know, so, and Doom would have made a song about that. Like, it would have been called like, Barrister Faced or something, you know. It would have been like, you know, take your foam and fucking here's my chrome or whatever. He said some funny shit about the dude with that face. And, you know, Lord Sco, he loves MF Doom to death. And that's maybe part of the reason he works with me. And a lot of the young kids, they fuck with me in part because of my relationship with Doom and others, but Doom is part of it. Oh, I'll say
Oh,
one more Doom thing.
I'm all ears, brother.
When he passed, Buster called me and he said, yo, D, is he really dead? And I said, yeah, he is, man. He really passed. And he was like, it was emotional. I'll leave it at that. But he was like, is it another trick from my man? You know, I thought that was so cool that he even gasped. Like, he had people not realizing, you know, people guessing, like, is it real?
I didn't know. I couldn't understand either. It was too poetic the way it was announced. I was like, is this?
Well, he also died in reality on Halloween. How crazy is that? The man in the
It's
mask on
insane.
Halloween.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of one. He's one for the ages. He is, and also the Phantom of the Opera thing, the Faustian understanding of all of this, the lore and the myth of it all, the pathos is unparalleled in the history, possibly in the history of music. There's very few people in the entire pantheon of music, period, other than maybe, I mean, no one in my mind who is as has as much myth attached to him.
I love hearing you talk about it. Me personally, it evokes so much emotion. I love his music. I love everything he stands for, his whole journey. And I just love hearing it from you. I really appreciate it, brother. Of
I'd be lying if I said I didn't cry periodically thinking about his loss.
course. Of course. Yeah, I totally get it. Well, let's talk about the other person you mentioned, Busta Rhymes, all
I
time great.
love him.
Tell me about your experience watching his meteoric rise to fame.
I mean, Buster's the hardest working man in showbiz. I've never seen anyone as more determined to accomplish as much as him, and he has the end results. Imagine if Grand Poobah had the energy and the determination to succeed and the want to, maybe I'd say the want or need to succeed on that level. Not to say Poobah didn't succeed. He succeeded in his own way. But if he had the hunger that Buster has, I mean, Buster is the hungriest, hardest working man I've ever seen, and the results verify this. And look, I've heard the whole Dilla record; it's fantastic, you know. So yeah, man, he's Buster Rhymes, man. He's my dear friend, my brother, my little bro. He calls me and I have to talk to him for hours when he does, because that's our relationship. And when he wants to find me, he finds me, and he does. And we will always be connected. And I think the loss of Dirty first, and then Doom, and both of my partners, Gamble and Geeby, have made the constant and the relationship with us more important. Neither of us is, and certainly Dave, neither of us is stupid to this. We are all very aware of this fact. And I was with him at the De La thing, after Dave passed, and the next day we talked, and I said, indirectly, I signed you because of De La Soul. He's like, huh? He's like, yeah, I heard about you probably from De La Soul the first time I heard about you guys. And then when I saw you rock with one mic, I already knew about you, and I'd already heard about you, and I was already half sold on how great you guys were. And I was like, and when I worked with you, it was a continuation of working with De La. And he, I guess, it had never been articulated before. And I literally went from the audience onto the stage with Buster, because he's like, yo, come on, big bro, we going on stage. Then we going up there, and we went up there, and we went up there, and who's going to tell Busta Rhymes he can't be on stage? And all of us. So yeah, man. And seeing him, I love the guy. He's like, whenever I hug him, it's like 10-minute hug, and he breaks my hand. He's that guy. He's a wild guy. He's a wild guy. It's larger than life. There's no one like him. And he's one of my, you make a lot of acquaintances in this thing, but he is someone I take as my chosen family.
He's clearly super talented. He's a chameleon, a star in multiple eras. When did you realize that he was the one?
The first time I ever saw him touch a mic, at the Payday, when they had one mic, 3 MCs, and he was conducting business. He was running the show. And I was like, and he sounded so good, and he was so charismatic. I was like, that guy is a fucking superstar. And I seen a few people in my life before that I knew were superstars. One of them was Latifah. One of them was HR from the Bad Brains. One of them was Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J. And he was just like those guys. He had that thing that only the greats have.
Did you encourage him to go solo?
Long story, but end story, you could say yes, not to the detriment of the group. The group it wasn't going to happen. And I let him know the minute the group broke up, because they broke up very publicly, that I had his back, and I had a solo deal for him whenever he wanted it. And he resisted it for a long time. But me and Chris Lighty finally convinced him that it was the thing he needed to do, and he did it. And that was that, and I have no regrets about that. I did not break up LONS. They disintegrated upon their own. But, it was clear before they broke up. I always let him know, hey man, if this don't go right, I got you. Because he was that special. And our bond was that. We had a bond like that. Our bond with him that I didn't have with the others. And maybe it's because he was the most talented, but I think we just understood each other. He kind of grew up in public around me. Like he grew up like right in front of me. It was like add water, watch this person evolve. And the person that he started out in Leaders and the person he was by the time they broke up and he embarked on a solo journey were very different people. And, he was smarter than the other guys and more talented. And I guess that explains why I ended up doing that. Cause he was that dude, I fucked with him. He was great. He's still great.
He's kind of a collectivist in a way. I know they broke up publicly. He had them on his albums.
Yeah, he did because he knows where he came from. And because I think part of him still loves those guys. For all the stuff that happened, I think he loves those guys, and if he could help them, he wants to help them.
Yeah. One artist I've never heard you talk about is Jay Dilla. What comes up when I bring that Up to you.
You know, I mean, I loved his music, but I didn't know Jay Dilla well. I went digging with him once or twice, a couple times. He hit me to the Roger Saunders record with the drum break, the one with the film canisters on it, the little Kodak things that I used on an Everlast song. I used the drums. I think he showed me that. He was a nice guy. He was quiet, a man of few words. Supremely talented. I feel like another one who, like Pete Rock, um, was a paradigm shifter, you know. And particularly, I thought that his first paradigm shift probably affected R&B, or what we called R&B, neo soul, more than it did hip hop. So that was maybe my first thought about him, because there's R&B, neo soul after him and before him. You know, there's the first D'Angelo record, but there's one like Jade. When Dilla becomes part of the Soulquarians and all that, everything changes. And he was a fantastic producer, man. You know, funny too, because when he starts working with Tribe, it's kind of the descent of Tribe, but it's the ascent of a lot of other things. So, you know, man, and his Donuts and his Shining may be, I may like those records more than his production for others, though I like all of it. So he's Jay Dilla. He's, you know, no quantize. Like, where's the one? Like, you know, it's like he's that guy. Like, and for that, he's amazing. He's like he's one of the greats. Like a Primo. You know, he has identifiable swing that no one else had. You hear a Primo beat, it's got the swing no one else has. Pete Rock got the thing no one else has. Only if you have that. You know, so, you know, God bless him. He was a cool dude. I knew his name was JD before he was Dilla.
Yeah, absolutely. Next record, Members Don't Get Weary, Max Roach.
Man, how do you know I love that record so much?
I
It's
don't know. I thought
crazy.
you would because you're friends with his son.
I mean, that record is like right now, like it's like my record of the year. Like I listen to it all the time. It's so beautiful. It's also very digestible. Sometimes jazz can lose people. That one never loses me. It's very, I don't know, man. It's just a beautiful work of art. It's my dad loved it. I love it. It's beautiful. And yeah, man, I was just texting with Raul about it the other day, asking him about it and how did it get to where it was, and about the players on it, and about, you know, his relationship to the players on it, and how amazing that record was. You know, Clifford Jordan, the fantastic player who played with him, him and Max, he does, I mean, Clifford Brown rather, and Clifford doesn't play on that record, but the stuff they did together is like some of the greatest music ever made. And Clifford Brown is probably the greatest trumpeter that people don't talk about, don't know about. But yeah, man, that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful record.
I'm glad you like it, and I'm not surprised. I can't believe we've come this far in the interview and not brought up the old dirty bastard.
I mean, what can I say about Old Dirty Bastard except that he's Old Dirty Bastard? He's the greatest. You know, no one was him, man. He's the greatest who ever did it. Like, you know, for what he did, he was his own thing. Like, no one could be Old Dirty Bastard. He's one of one in the way that Doom was. Different. I feel like his time on Earth was short, and I kind of knew that would be short innately. I don't think I ever worked on that record and said, like, this guy's not going to be here forever. He might die. He might this, but I knew I had lightning in a bottle because I was handed half that, 2/3 of the album. So all I had to do was get that thing to the finish line. It took a year to do it, but I did it. And man, the end results, fuck, man, Brooklyn Zoo might be the record I am proudest to have my name attached to of any record I ever made, because it is such a great record, as is Shimmy Shimmy. And I was forced to give my background to an artist once in a room full of the Atlantic Records A&R staff, and I neglected to say Old Dirty Bastard, and Drama yelled at me. DJ Drama said, "Motherfucker, how are you going to leave out Old Dirty Bastard?" And everyone laughed. And I said, yeah, I did that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that record I will always be synonymous with it, because I think everyone knows my relationship with him and the estate and the family who I am close with and have had the honor of being included into their estate, which is no small feat for me to be included in the estate because they know how much I loved him and worked hard for him because he was worth it. You know, you only get one old dirty bastard in your lifetime if you're lucky.
You're an incredible storyteller. That's what makes these interviews so great. Not only that you were there, a part of these legendary artists, you were there from a creative standpoint. You've seen so much. Your book, Son of the City, it's incredible. Tell me
Thank
about
you.
your life as a writer.
I mean, my life as a writer is like if I had to add all the hours uh, up to like monetary payment, it would be like 3 cents per hour. Like it's like the least you make no money as a writer. So my dad never had any money, but from writing the book, I wrote I wrote a screenplay, a teleplay that I managed to sell to Lionsgate. Um, I've been actively pursuing writing. I wrote a documentary that I am finished with, kind of. It's locked, whatever that means. The edit is done for now. We're syncing music. I helped write the Old Dirty Bastard documentary. I am in the throes of writing another one that I am not allowed to talk about, that I am going to shoot a sizzle for with my dear friend Nick Quested. And I love the written word. It is a gift to be able to explore different creative avenues as you get older. And I continue to write and plug away. And my greatest joy and my biggest challenge is being a successful writer. Writing is so hard. How Sasha Jenkins did it and made a living out of it is something to marvel out of. And I just love to try and write and keep writing, and I'm okay at it, and I get better all the time. So I like it though. It's a beautiful way to express yourself. I am, I guess, articulate, a bit verbose, but I'm a complicated guy, and it helps me unpack some of the complicatedness of my life and others by telling stories.
You're an incredible writer.
No, maybe.
Your prose, your style. I listened to your audiobook, and to hear your intonations while you're saying it, there's an added layer of emotion in certain points,
Thank
and
you.
it's a fantastic writing style. I really want to commend you on that because it's not easy to be good at everything, and that's something that you shared it later in your life.
I mean, I read a lot and I've read a lot my whole life. I had a rule growing up. I was not allowed to watch a lot of TV. And I kind of just don't, I never watch TV during the daytime. I refuse to allow myself to. And, I only watch TV, like in the evening after I've done all the shit I have to do, including maybe working out or whatever I got to do. And that rule has always led me to reading. I'm always reading a book. I read on planes. I listen to audiobooks now in the car, but I'm a voracious reader and I love the written word. And, my book, I love a couple of writers whose voices I hear in there. Certainly Charles Bukowski and Harry Cruz, and a couple other guys, Raymond Carver and Flannery O'Connor and Paul Beatty, who I love, and maybe I channel some of those voices on occasion. Certainly Bukowski is the easiest one to stylistically channel, and I wanted my book to be. I didn't want it to emulate Bukowski because there's a lot of writers who do that, but certainly to have some of the through line and honesty, and maybe the Bukowski writes sans metaphor. So I definitely had some metaphors in there, but also I think sometimes people get a little loose with the metaphors here and there, and Carver doesn't have a lot of them either. And I think that that's cool to challenge yourself to do that. So man, I have some of my influences are in there, and man, I'm looking out my bookshelf. It's behind me right now. I mean, in front of me, and I'm just looking at all these great writers who I read all the time. James M. Cain and Jim Thompson and Jonathan Latham, and it goes on and on and on, and Harper Lee, and I forgot one of my biggest influences, Edward Bunker, who is one of the greatest writers who ever lived. And man, I can't imagine a world without. I don't understand people who don't read. And on top of all of this, I am slightly dyslexic, and it was caught really early on in my life. And because of my challenges, particularly with grammar and spelling, because of my dyslexia, it made reading a real gift to me. And as a kid, I was like, I was a tough kid. And my escape was reading the written word, and it was a way to overcome dyslexia and a way to escape the dysfunction that surrounded me. It was like a free vacation. And I cannot understand people in this world who do not read, because reading is beyond fundamental. It helped it develop my intellect. It's where I learned critical thinking, on some levels. So, man, writing and reading is like one of the most important things you can do in the whole world. Like, I cannot be friends with people who don't, I can be friends with people who don't read, but I'm going to certainly, question your level of intellect if you're not a reader.
I think that's fair. You might have just inspired one of our listeners to pick up a book again. So that's good. That's good. I consider you a master of reinvention throughout your many phases of life.
Thank you. The pivot is important.
Yeah. I mean, you're finding a whole new wave as a storyteller, and I think it's
Thank you.
impressive to see.
Thank you, man.
If you were to look at this next phase of your life, and if you were to look back and say, "Hey, I was happy with that," what would have happened?
Write a second book, maybe a third. I'm working on a short story book. It's kind of I got all the stories. I just got to edit it and see if I can get someone dumb enough to publish it and maybe pay me $1 for it. Um, Making documentaries, continuing to write screenplays, being involved in music, the culture of music, continuing my love of storytelling. I've been reluctant to enter the podcast space and all that, but I may do it. And to, work with another great artist before it's all done. And I have a couple artists I work with who I think are pretty great. We'll see what the public thinks, but I would love to hang my hat on a great one again. And whether it's Sko or Yoshi T from What More, or Haile Supreme, who I think is just a special, special artist, a soul singer, to hang my head on one more before I go, would be important. Like I didn't, I didn't break Action Bronson, but I certainly was at the forefront of discovering him, and others, Little Dicky and some others who were successful. I really like what Action has done. He probably would have been a guy I'd be happy to hang my hat on if I was still working with him.
New album's great. New album's great.
Yeah, I got to listen to it. I think I kind of marvel more at his evolution as a full rounded artist. So I got to listen to it. I'm sure it is great though. He's a great rapper. So, man, I just want to I'd love to find another artist or two who are important to the whole world, not just me, which is harder and harder to do these days, especially when you're not ever going to find Sabrina Carpenter. But I'd like to do that, and I'd like to continue my pursuit of the written word, storytelling, and just to stay involved in culture and continue to learn to be teachable, man. Being teachable is a great gift at my age, and I'm teachable still, and that, to me, maybe it's an important component in where I am in life now, to be able to teach and to remain teachable. So that's where I'm at, man. That's where it resides.
We'll be listening for everything that you have to share. Appreciate everything you're doing, brother.
Thank you, man.
Peace.
Peace.